Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. It's been a little while since my last video, but there hasn't really been too much content since the last main update. The mid-month has been particularly dry, with only a premium tier 2 character that can't even be awakened or taken to T3, at least at the moment. But I think there's a specific reason for this, and I cover that near the end of the video if you're interested to know what I think it means about the game. This video likely won't be too interesting for most people, so I tried to keep it short and just show what she can do in her current state in both PvE and PvP. If you want to build the character for PvE, just for fun at the moment, since she can't compete with the other characters due to a lack of her upgrade, the main build that you would probably go with is a CTP of Judgment, because she does fire damage. But keep in mind that she might not do fire damage in the immediate future, since she might not have the Phoenix Force kind of powers with her next uniform. So if you're anticipating for the future, you might want to give her a Rage instead. You can potentially make a single skill damage proc work, like a CTP of Energy or a CTP of Destruction. But I found the best way for that build to work is for you to kind of delay some skills so that you can align the proc to the skills that you want. With the first batch of tests, I'm not using any kind of damage proc, and her damage is actually not that great since I barely finished stage 60 of Thanos with 15 seconds left. I messed around with some potential rotations, but the one that I found worked the best is to use the second skill and very slightly delay cancel that into the first skill, which you cancel into the third skill to get your damage accumulation, and cancel that immediately into the fifth skill. After you do your little animation, you have to wait till she lands and has the kind of big AoE fire damage burst there to delay cancel that into the fourth skill, which is typically the skill that you want to proc on. So just to summarize, the skill rotation is to delay cancel 1, cancel 3, cancel 5, delay cancel 4. If you're using a CTP of Energy or Destruction, you might want to open with the fifth skill when the fight just starts, so you proc immediately on it. Then after the first proc ends, you can go into your fourth skill, and after that one ends, you can go into your main rotation. Unfortunately, even versus Cull Obsidian, the character struggles because there is no all defense down that ignores immunity on the character's kit. Funny enough, even though the character does elemental damage, the base kit for the character is physical based, meaning that you can't use her versus Ebony Maw, since he has very high immunity versus physical damage, even though he is susceptible to elemental damage. As you can see here, it took me about 40 seconds to even take one bar off the boss. So for those first tests, they were without a damage proc, and for these other ones, they are with a damage proc, being a CTP of Destruction. It does improve her clear time quite a bit, but it still depends on how good her stat bump is or her T3 or Awaken skill is when she gets an upgrade to see just how good she can potentially be. That said, her base stats at level 70 are actually quite good for a blast type, so if they do a 1.5 times increase or possibly even a 2 times increase, she should be pretty good in PvE, but if not there, she'll definitely be pretty solid in PvP. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute or two when I show you the timeline and Alliance Conquest results. I did also take the character into Alliance Battle Extreme, even though it doesn't really mean anything because again, the character can't be upgraded, but it will give you an idea of how she does with no damage proc on the no restrictions day. Without a proc, I was able to score somewhere around the 3 million mark, I would say, which is actually pretty decent. Then using that CTP of Destruction, I was able to bump that score up by nearly 2 million, which if I was to use something like a CTP of Judgment or Rage would probably be closer to the 3 million mark or higher. The character does have Silence, Burn, and Paralysis currently in their kit, as well as a Damage Leadership, which means that in the future the devs could potentially make her a viable or essential part for Alliance Battle Extreme if you want to get a high score. The first test that I did in PvP was to use a guard break immunity obelisk on her with no invincible proc or anything else, just to see how she would do without any kind of additional help. She was capable of taking out 1 life per sentry, but after that she struggled to survive or do enough damage to follow up with the 2nd life or anything else. With the rest of the tests that I did, I went with that CTP of destruction that I mentioned earlier for a couple of different reasons. The very first reason is that the character doesn't have any penetration in their kit, so the penetration that you get from the CTP of destruction actually helps quite a bit, especially because the character has a lot of lingering fire damage skills. You can see I was actually able to take down both of Sentry's lives this time, but ultimately died to Doom or other characters that have long iframes because the character doesn't have iframe ignore. One of the other reasons why I'm using a CTP of destruction is because the character isn't upgraded, so without that stat bump, that extra damage is really useful for taking out characters quickly before the opponent does the same. I didn't use a CTP of Regen or Authority for 2 reasons. One of them is, again, without that stat bump upgrade, that HP shield won't really do too much for using a Regen, and for CTP of Authority, her AI frequently spams the 5th skill first with the highest priority, and that has 6 seconds of invincible on it. So if you were to use a CTP of Authority, it likely would be kind of redundant because that invincible from the Authority might proc at the same time that the 6 seconds of invincible is up from that 5th skill. Taking this into consideration, once the character does get a stat bump increase, if the HP pool increases a significant amount, then I would say that a CTP of Regen would likely be the best option for her, because she does have that passive healing built into her kit in her tier 2 passive. One of the final reasons why I use the CTP of destruction is because the character has high priority skills, and you can see that because I tested her versus Molecule Man, which himself has one of the highest priority skills in the game. What this means is that the character will likely attack first, and because her 2nd skill is a somewhat decent long iframe, you can avoid a bunch of damage and get the full value from the destruction's damage proc. As you saw from the previous clips, her damage is pretty decent since she can take out a sentry and even one of the tankiest characters in game, that being a Gilgamesh. I wasn't able to test her too thoroughly in Alliance Conquest, but she seemed to take out combat types pretty easily, especially ones that don't have iframe ignore. I know Apocalypse isn't really the best measure since he does need a new uniform at this point for being a native tier 2, but you can see that you can get some value out of her even without an upgrade in this mode. I wanted to push the character a little bit to see if she could beat combat types with an iframe ignore, and surprisingly enough, she was able to essentially wipe this fight, so beat it, but I ultimately did end up losing because Sinister has that immortal artifact. Regardless, you can see the potential of the character now, and even though I wouldn't advocate getting the character, in the future when she does get an upgrade, you will probably have a pretty solid addition to your roster. Also keep in mind that I didn't have the artifact through this testing, so if you're lucky enough to get it, it should help you out a little bit more. But again, if you want my opinion, I would probably hold off getting that bio sub to get the character until another one comes out that probably has an upgrade as well. And hopefully by then, this character will also have an upgrade too. In addition, if you're wondering why the patch was so dull, my speculation on the matter is that this mid-month kind of update was supposed to be bundled with the Phoenix update, which included Wolverine, Hyperion, and Captain America, but likely due to timing restrictions, the holidays, and possibly COVID, it was delayed, especially because the Eternals movie was dropping somewhere around that time, so they probably had to kind of delay this character with that main update and focus on the Eternals and meeting that deadline. One of the reasons why I'm thinking this is because if you look on the right, you'll see that they also included banner art for the character, which usually isn't made for mid-month updates. It's usually made for main updates. So they probably just dropped this character off at this particular time because there wasn't really any other place that they could have released it. Also, based off the end of the event quest timers and the fact that we still haven't gotten the event related to acquiring Adam Warlock's special icon, we'll likely get another mid-month, which hopefully will be an actual mid-month this time. That should land somewhere around this Tuesday. If I had to guess, I'd likely say that we'll get an upgrade for Rocket and Groot, or potentially Punisher / Cosmic Ghost Rider and Nova. The reason that I think this is because we got those data mines a while back for Rocket, and we did get, I guess, some potential hints at Cosmic Ghost Rider or Nova through the icons that we got with this main patch. So maybe expect to see teasers for that in a few hours after this video is uploaded. I'm hoping that I'm kind of wrong and that we get the Ultron and Thanos uniform upgrades that people want, but I suspect that they might delay that into another mid-month. Anyways, that wraps it up for this semi-boring video. I have some stuff that I'm working on, and hopefully there's some better content that I can cover this week, so make sure to check that out. As always, thank you for your time and watching, but the video is now over.